Ever find yourself wondering who the big players might be in the next presidential election cycle?
Definitely. It feels early, but these things start, well, years out, don't they?
They really do. So today, we're diving into a fascinating conversation that's already trying to map out the potential field for the 2028 Democratic nomination.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is we're looking at names being floated so far in advance. It really gives you a sense of the long game in presidential politics.
Exactly. That early jockeying, the strategic thinking that's just always happening kind of behind the scenes.
Right.
Our roadmap for this deep dive, it comes from a discussion featuring Andrew Yang, where he and his guest explored who might be in the running.
Okay.
So we're going to sift through their predictions, the reasoning behind them, and ultimately what this early speculation might tell us about the possible direction of the Democratic Party.
And it's important to remember the backdrop here, right? The current Democratic landscape is, well, it's always evolving. And future elections are inherently uncertain.
Absolutely. So these predictions are made against that uncertainty. Just like the conversation we're dissecting, we're starting with that big question: who's best positioned, really, to lead the party in 28?
Okay, let's get into it. Where do they start?
Okay, let's jump right into some of these potential contenders. The conversation kicks off with Gavin Newsom. He's mentioned as, quote, definitely running.
Wow, definitely. That's pretty confident for this early stage. He's got the high profile, obviously, governor of California.
Right, but they also immediately bring up potential hurdles.
Like what?
Well, the coastal elite thing, as they put it, and then there's what's described as the baggage of the fires.
Yeah, the wildfires. That's been a huge issue.
And there's even a pretty vivid comparison made to a Katrina moment regarding the response to those fires.
Ugh, a Katrina moment. That really sticks with you, doesn't it? That's a heavy comparison.
It is. The underlying point being made, apparently, is that some see California under his leadership as, and this is a quote, an anti-advertisement for Democratic rule.
That raises a big question, how much does the national view of a candidate's home state actually affect their chances, especially a state as, well, complex as California?
But the assumption in the discussion is, okay, he knows these challenges and he's going to try and navigate them. So moving on, another name that comes up very strongly is Gretchen Whitmer.
Right, governor of Michigan. She's suggested as someone who has, quote, waited her turn.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is the mention that Barack Obama apparently favored her for a potential 2024 primary challenge if Biden hadn't run again.
Oh, that's fascinating. I hadn't heard that specifically. So high praise from within the party establishment, then.
Seems like it. She's positioned as maybe a #1 draft pick for 24, alongside Josh Shapiro, if things had gone differently.
Okay, Whitmer and Shapiro. That kind of assessment really speaks volumes about how she's regarded.
And of course, the swing state factor, Michigan. That's huge, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. Demonstrating you can win in those battleground states is, well, it's often seen as a major plus for electability in a general election.
Her personal story also gets highlighted. Yeah, the attempted kidnapping plot. That's a pretty powerful narrative.
It is. It creates a certain image, a certain resilience.
And then there's this sort of lighter note, Bill Maher's comment about her looking like a typical TV or movie president.
Well, it sounds superficial, maybe. But in today's media world, image does play a role, whether we like it or not.
It does raise that question about electability, doesn't it? How much does that kind of maybe unfair image perception factor into how voters see leadership potential?
It's a constant debate.
Now, Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, also named. And again, the emphasis is that swing state appeal.
Pennsylvania, yeah. So Whitmer from Michigan, Shapiro from Pennsylvania. It really drives home the importance of those states, doesn't it?
It does. This early focus on governors from these key battlegrounds, it definitely tells you something about the strategic thinking, maybe, within the party looking ahead to 28.
Secure the industrial Midwest, perhaps.
Okay, moving on. J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, also mentioned. And a key point highlighted. He's quite wealthy.
Right. The self-funding aspect, that's a massive advantage.
Huge. It means you can bypass a lot of the constant fundraising grind, right?
Totally. It gives a candidate a lot more freedom, potentially, to shape their message, their strategy, without being beholden to donors quite as much.
And his current tone, apparently, is one of standing up to Trump, which is highlighted as a potential strength with the Democratic base.
Yeah, tapping into that resistance energy makes sense.
His message about taking the fight to Washington seems central to his potential appeal.
Okay.
And then there's this really interesting anecdote about how Trump supposedly views potential rivals.
Oh.
Well, the conversation contrasts Trump's reported concern about running against Newsom, apparently because of Newsom's appearance.
Seriously, appearance.
Yeah, versus his reported dismissal of Pritzker, also maybe because of appearance. It's a fascinating little window into how Trump might evaluate opponents. Very visual.
Wow. So the anecdote shared was that Trump sometimes watches potential rivals on TV with the sound off, just to get a sense of how they look.
Exactly. It really underscores that visual dimension of politics today.
It certainly does, and it makes you wonder how much does that kind of surface-level assessment play into how voters perceive candidates, too? Hard to say.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland. He's described as likely to run.
Okay, more. What's the take on him?
Really positive attributes mentioned, like vivacity and energy. That kind of enthusiasm, it can be infectious, can't it?
It absolutely can. And they mentioned that social media video, right, of him at the Maryland football practice.
Yeah, that paints a picture, doesn't it? Dynamic, engaged.
Kind of projects youthfulness and vigor.
And the comparisons made to Obama are quite striking.
Oh, really? In what way?
Well, the words used are inspirational, uplifting, handsome, which, echoes a lot of how Obama was described early on.
Okay, I see that.
But then they draw a contrast. Moore's military background versus Obama's as a constitutional law professor. It suggests maybe a different kind of appeal.
Right. That military experience might resonate with a different slice of the electorate, maybe project a different kind of strength or leadership style compared to the more academic background. Interesting contrast.
Now, this next one was framed as breaking news in the discussion, Cory Booker potentially running in 2028.
Booker. Okay. He's obviously been on the national stage before, ran in 2020.
He has, and they reference his 25-hour filibuster as a reminder of his willingness to do these, dramatic attention-grabbing things.
Right. He does have a flair for the theatrical sometimes. Yep. There was also a little personal connection mentioned.
Yeah, one of the speaker's mothers apparently worked at his law firm way back. Just a little personal aside.
Oh.
But then there's the observation that his 2020 message, it didn't quite connect the way maybe he hoped, even though he's seen as a good, smart, sincere man. And the question gets raised about how his stunts, and that's the word they used, how do those play in an era where voters seem to be really craving authenticity?
That's a really good question. In this political climate, with so much skepticism about things feeling, manufactured, how does that approach land? It's tricky.
Definitely something to think about. Okay, next up. Pete Buttigieg.
Mayor Pete, now Secretary Pete.
Right. And the key point here is his decision to pass on what was described as a very winnable Senate race in Michigan.
Yeah, that move definitely signaled bigger ambitions, didn't it? Hard to read it any other way. Suggests a focus on the national stage.
Totally. And he gets praise in the discussion for being articulate, nice, and possibly the best communicator in the party next to Gavin. High praise.
He is very polished, very articulate. That's definitely one of his perceived strengths for a potential presidential run.
The reasoning given for not running for Senate, that he was relatively new to the state, Michigan, it makes some sense, logically.
So sure, you can frame it that way.
But that underlying presidential ambition, it seems pretty clear, doesn't it?
It does seem clear. He's strategically building that national profile, honing those communication skills.
Right.
Crucial assets if you're aiming for the White House.
Well, okay, let's bring in some more progressive voices mentioned. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC.
Right. What's the prediction there?
Predicted to end up running. And she's seen as having a very, very clear energy lane.
That makes sense. She has a massive, highly engaged following. Her platform resonates really strongly with a very important segment of the Democratic base.
Yeah, that very, very clear energy lane. It suggests she'd have a distinct appeal, a passionate base from the get-go.
No doubt. And Ro Khanna.
Also predicted to run. And the evidence cited is his frequent travel to those key early primary states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina.
Ah, the early state circuit. Yeah, that's usually a pretty strong signal of serious presidential consideration. You don't really do that kind of groundwork unless you're, seriously thinking about it.
Right. Testing the waters, building support, making connections. It definitely indicates a high level of interest, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kamala Harris. This is a really interesting one, despite being the current vice president.
Yeah, what's the take?
The speaker in this conversation expresses some doubt about her actually running in 2028.
Oh, wow. doubt about the sitting VP running. That's a significant observation. What's the reasoning?
It seems to stem from her performance in the 2020 primary
Mm-hmm.
when compared against this potential 2028 field.
Okay. So looking back at how she fared against some of these same potential rivals last time.
Exactly. And the alternative scenario suggested is that maybe she runs for governor of California instead.
Governor of California. That would certainly be a high-profile path, a major political post in its own right. Interesting alternative.
Definitely. Okay, then we kind of hit a speed round of other potential names. Rahm Emanuel gets mentioned.
Rahm. Okay. Blast from the past, almost.
Yeah, the speaker said they almost forgot, but still believes will probably run. He brings a ton of political experience, obviously.
He does, though, his long career, sometimes controversial. That could cut both ways in a primary. Baggage, but also experience.
True. Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, also added to the list. Apparently he's doing his own sort of tour.
Walz, okay. So it sounds like a lot of these governors are at least, testing the waters, putting feelers out, which is typical for this early stage, I suppose.
Seems like it. Amy Klobuchar is also included in this speed round of likely runners.
Klobuchar. Makes sense. She's got that Midwest appeal, ran before, has the experience of a national campaign under her belt. Those are assets.
John Fetterman mentioned that when asked, he didn't rule out a run.
Didn't rule it out. Okay, so not a yes, but not a no. Keeping options open. Standard procedure.
Yeah. Exactly. Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, described as angling for something, but the speaker wasn't totally convinced it was specifically a presidential run.
Mm-hmm. Maybe angling for a cabinet position or just a higher profile within the Senate. His focus on certain policy areas like guns could position him for various roles.
Could be. Stacey Abrams is considered almost certain to run.
Abrams. Yeah, she's become such a significant figure, especially for her work in Georgia and the South. Huge national profile now.
Definitely. Jared Polis, governor of Colorado.
Yeah.
Seen as having a real chance of running.
Polis. He offers maybe a different flavor, more moderate, libertarian-ish Democrat, business-friendly.
Right. That could appeal to a different segment of the party, offer a distinct alternative if the field gets crowded.
His unique background, yeah, could make him stand out.
And then just a quick mention of Dean Phillips. Remember him from his recent primary challenge?
Vaguely, yes.
Well, there's an anecdote that during that run, he apparently told Gavin Newsom that Newsom should be running right now, meaning for 2024.
Oh, interesting. A little peek behind the curtain at those kinds of conversations happening between potential rivals or players highlights that agency, some might feel.
Yeah. Now, beyond these, more established or frequently mentioned names, the conversation also touches on the idea of a phoenix that rises from the ashes.
Ah, the unexpected candidate. The Obama '08 scenario, basically. Someone relatively unknown who just catches fire.
Exactly. That's always a possibility in politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Things can change so fast. Unpredictable.
Absolutely. The landscape can shift dramatically. Unforeseen events, a sudden crisis, a compelling new message. It can elevate someone completely unexpected.
The discussion even briefly mentions folks like Mark Cuban and Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, the rich alternative path figures.
Yeah.
People who flirted with politics outside the traditional two-party system.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to maybe an undercurrent of dissatisfaction with the status quo, doesn't it, that these kinds of names even come up.
It does, and it reflects that broader trend, maybe, of people with non-political backgrounds thinking about jumping in, often appealing to voters who feel, disillusioned with the establishment parties.
So, looking at the big picture, the current state of the Democratic Party is described in this conversation as potentially a scattered mess without a clear, unifying leader right now.
That's pretty blunt, but it kind of reflects the reality after an incumbent president, right? When there isn't an obvious heir apparent, things can get fragmented. Leads to a more wide open, maybe more competitive nomination fight.
Yeah. And there's criticism mentioned about the delay in the nomination process itself, a feeling that maybe the party needs to start coalescing around potential leaders sooner.
Interesting. The argument being, I suppose, that an earlier start allows more time for vetting, for candidates to connect, for the party to figure out its direction.
Something like that. More clarity sooner.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's the media landscape.
Right. Highlighted as being so fragmented now, making it much harder for new voices, maybe like that Phoenix, to actually break through and get national attention.
That's a huge point. It's a totally different environment than when Obama emerged, for instance.
Yeah.
The way people get information is so diffuse now.
Yeah, requires completely different strategies to gain attention, build a profile. It's a massive hurdle for anyone who isn't already a household name.
Definitely a challenge.
So when you just step back and look at all of this, The sheer number of potential candidates they talked about is really something.
How many did they hit?
Easily went past 24 names, just
Uh,
rattling them off.
Wow, 24. That really underscores the breadth of potential ambition out there in the Democratic Party and just how wide open 2028 feels right now at this very early point.
So I guess the key takeaways from this deep dive are, one, it's incredibly early, obviously. Two, there's a really diverse range of potential candidates, all with different strengths, different weaknesses. And three, there are these big fundamental questions still hanging out there about the future direction of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and for me, what stands out is that constant undercurrent of electability, especially winning those swing states, and also the challenge for any candidate to just break through the noise in this crowded field and fragmented media world.
Right. So for you, the listener, thinking about this potentially massive field, this shifting landscape, what qualities do you think will be most important for a Democratic candidate to have to actually succeed in 2028?
Yeah, good question. What's the magic formula?
And what kind of unexpected things, events, developments do you think we might see in the next few years that could just completely shake up this very early list we've been talking about?
It's certainly a lot to chew on.
Definitely.
And maybe keep in mind, too, that brief mention of those alternative paths, the Cubans, the McConaughey's, the Yangs exploring independent routes. It hints that the shifts might go beyond just the Democratic primary, could affect the whole political conversation.
A really good point. The entire landscape might look different by then.